Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 7th of April 2023, and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin with the Chief of the Army Staff, General Asim Munir, who on Thursday has renewed the determination of his institution of the defense of Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity against all kind of threats, and continuity of the support to the just cause of the Kashmiris struggling for their right to self-determination. This is very important in the current context of all that is happening, all the intelligence-based operations also that are happening successfully across the nation, and all the terrorist threats that the armed forces are also countering effectively, whether it be in Balochistan or in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. This is going to be our leading segment. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan IMF talks and the government's efforts to stabilize the economy. Whether on the one hand, Raza has met with David Bloom, the US ambassador to Pakistan, in which important issues concerning IMF and economic cooperation between both the countries were discussed. On the other hand, there is also a strong report that Raza will not be going for the meeting of the IMF between the 10th to the 16th of April. This is going to be our second story. Then we'll be talking about Israel's military that has launched air attacks on southern Lebanon and the Gaza following a spate of reported rocket attacks in the country. This is something that has been going on continuously since quite some time. We've seen what happened at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and since then even people are not allowed to pray properly or effectively at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They are thrown out of the mosque. This and more will be part of our third story, and our final story is the World Health Day that is being celebrated today. And on this auspicious occasion, our Prime Minister Mr. Shehbaz Sharif has tweeted that the launch of the mental health app has now been done from the Pakistani portal, and is a very important application in order to ascertain which kind of mental health issues you have and how to treat them effectively. A good step in the right direction. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the different intelligence-based operations that are going across the country, Pakistan's armed forces and their efforts to thwart all the attempts by the terrorist organization to create havoc in our country. This has also been said by our Chief of the Army Staff, General Asim Munir. More in the following report.
Pakistan is confronted with the spectre of resurgent militancy, and the return of terrorism has aggravated our security challenges. The latest wave of terrorism necessitated collective resolve and comprehensive strategy to combat the scourge of militancy. Chief of Army Staff General Asim Munir reiterated determination of his institution for the defense of Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity against all kinds of threats. The Army Chief emphasized that Pakistan Army will defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Pakistan against all kinds of threats, and is determined to support just cause of Kashmiris. Security forces have ramped up operations against militants across the country after an uptick in terror activities. 8 terrorists, including a local commander, were killed in an intelligence-based operation in South Waziristan's Sheen Warsak area. ISPR said that terrorists, including Commander Jan Mohammed, were gunned down in an intense fire exchange during the operation. Earlier, a deadly cross-border raid took place in remote Ketch district in southwestern Balochistan province, in which 4 Pakistani soldiers embraced martyrdoms when a group of terrorists from across the Iranian side of the border attacked a routine military patrol. Security forces of Pakistan are determined to eliminate the menace of terrorism, and sacrifices of our brave soldiers further strengthen the resolve of our nation against terrorists.
Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan, Defence Analyst, joins us online. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, in the wake of the statement made by the Chief of the Army Staff, reiterating that the Pakistan Army will defend the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Pakistan against all kinds of threats, and is also determined to support the just cause of the Kashmiris, how important is the timing of this statement?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think right now, Pakistan is under attack, from a number of terrorist groups, and there is terrorism in Balochistan and Sindh, and terrorism in KP and elsewhere. And both these terrorist activities have different dynamics. For instance, the terrorism in Balochistan and in Sindh, it is essentially against the CPAC, and it is funded from abroad, essentially from India. And these terrorists have been using the Afghan soil the soil of some European countries, uh, some Middle Eastern countries like the UAE and Bahrain for transferring funds to them. Only today, this morning, one of the main leaders of these terrorists, Gulzar Imam, he was captured alive, which is a big achievement. And, he was involved uh, with the raising and heading of a number of smaller terrorist organizations like the PLA, the UBA, the BNA, and the BRAS. And they are involved, on the attacks on the Chinese consulates and a number of other attacks in Balochistan. Of course, there are attacks in KP and there are different groups. You're aware that those attacks are by the TTP. And you must have seen, in the last month or so, those attacks have actually come down uh, because of a number of reasons. At the political level, when the defense minister and the DGISI went to Afghanistan and they met in Kabul, their counterparts, and also a number of other senior officials from the Taliban government, and communicated very clearly to them our concerns and also the consequences of the ongoing terrorism in KP by the TTP. And I think it is because of that that see a downtrend there in KP. I hope that continues. So it is, both these kinds of terrorist activities uh, that were of concern, to the army chief and to the entire security organization of Pakistan, and of course to the people of Pakistan. And there was an NSC meeting today which just ended, and I think the forum was briefed about all kinds of threats to the national security of Pakistan, and with the resolve that every possible effort will be made to actually contain it effectively and eventually to finish all these terrorist activities in Pakistan.
All right, General Saab, I'd like to understand on the 15th of this month, the Chief of the Army Staff reiterated the importance of synergy amongst all the institutions in order to thwart all the terrorism or the terrorist activities that are happening in the country. How important, under the current situation, the political situation, otherwise, that the country is engulfed in, is the importance of the fact that all the institutions need to be on one page when it comes to tackling terrorist elements and terrorism?
Okay, so when we are talking of security institutions, then obviously there is a lead agency, and normally it is the inter-service intelligence agency. Then there is the military intelligence agency, which works under the general headquarters. Then there is the FIA, there is the Intelligence Bureau. Then there are the provincial counter-terrorism departments. So there should be synergy amongst all of them. Unfortunately, when it comes to the role of the provincial counterterrorism department, then you cannot say that they are performing their role as is expected. And the reason for that is that they are not as organized or as trained as they should be, essentially because of lack of funds and because also of the involvement of the police in looking after, the political activities and turmoil that is being going on for the last many months. So I think all of these uh, they need to be looked at so that that synergy returns. At the same time, I think our border security both at the Pak-Afghan border and Pak-Iran border is important. And I think we will need to have some kind of, combined or joint efforts by China, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, because these terrorists are a threat to all four countries. And I think there should be coordination, intelligence sharing amongst all these four countries. And because China is a big country and it has the technological edge, so they could actually assist all these countries in finding out these terrorists and also partially, particularly in Pakistan, for the purpose of attacks on CPEC to share the funding, security funding of this. So when that happens, I think we will be able to control this menace of terrorism. Having said that, I think it is also extremely important that we undertake our own security audits, particularly in the provinces, which lack in many resources, like CCTV cameras, monitors, forensic science labs, etc. So put together, I think these things need to be done, and hopefully they will be done in the near future.
The importance of intelligence-based operations, General Saab, whether it be in apprehending Gulzar Imam alias Shambe, whether it be in killing the 8 terrorists, including a local commander, Jan Muhammad, in South Waziristan's Shin Warsak area. How important are these IBOs for apprehending such elements that are trying to create havoc in Pakistan?
So, as I said, the intelligence collection, collation, and dissemination. There are all these three aspects of that. And while intelligence collection through technology is important, and I made a mention of China helping us in that. I think human intelligence is extremely important, and when it comes to that, I think the people of Pakistan, the civil society, the civil police, the religious organization, uh, the political leadership across the political divide, they need to actually tell the people to cooperate with the intelligence agencies, provide them intelligence about these terrorists. They're living in the urban areas or even in the rural areas. To inform them about their supporters, their logistic facilitators, their financial supporters. Unless that is done, I think it will be very difficult for the intelligence agencies alone to do it. So it has to be a wholesome approach that we need to undertake.
How do you foresee the security landscape of Pakistan, General Saab, in this year? If you look at the latest report, the annual Global Terrorism Index that was released by an Australian-based Institute of Economics and Peace, it has revealed that Pakistan has recorded the second largest increase in terrorism-related deaths worldwide in the year 2022. What are your expectations from this year?
I think these incidents of terrorism should gradually decrease. I think the organized terrorism, like it was, till the time when the NATO ISAF forces were there in Afghanistan. I think that is not there, but there is definitely a regrouping of the TTP in some areas of first white Fata. There is some organization in Sawad, some in Bunair, and the terrorists, as I said, who are supported openly, no, not clandestinely, but openly by India, are there in Balochistan. So, as I said, we have to take political decisions first of all. Like if the threat is against CPEC, then China and Pakistan, I think they need to inform the world about it and inform India also about it in no clear terms, unclear in terms, that if they are going to hurt our security interests, our economic interests, then we will reserve the right, to do whatever is in our power. And similarly, I think the government of Afghanistan has been communicating directly and indirectly. But I think at the Security Council level, at the level of the OIC, again we need to, I think, inform them also, so that they can also exercise their influence on those who are supporting terrorists from abroad. And as I said earlier, when it comes to the TTP, then there is an excellent document that has been made by the government of Pakistan. It was made 2 years back, and it is known as Paigam-e-Pakistan. And
I
it says that people, who are actually uh, motivated by a certain ideology, we have also, face them with the correct ideology, with the better ideology, wherein it is very clearly mentioned, that suicide is forbidden in the religion. Murder is also forbidden. And, our religion says that the
But
murder of
Raza Sahab,
one
the fact
innocent.
remains that there are elements that misuse our religion, that misuse the policies as enshrined by our religion, and then misuse it for their terrorist gains. And this has nothing to do with our religion and more to do with their philosophy and their ideology, which might be sponsored by other foreign elements or other countries that do not want Pakistan to be stabilized. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan, Sub-Defense Analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the resolve by the Army Chief to defend Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity, at the same time to have a synergy amongst the institutions so that there could be a common resolve against all such elements. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Pakistan's economy, the IMF-Pakistan relationship, the tranche that Pakistan is waiting to receive from the IMF, also the Pakistani rupee that has maintained an upward momentum against the US dollar, appreciating nearly 0.38% in the interbank market. Dr. Usman Chohan, political economist, joins us online. Usman, thank you very much to have joined us. It's always lovely to discuss economy with you. Usman, let's begin with the upward or the stability of the rupee vis-a-vis the dollar. Is it only related to the IMF and the news that came from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia of the assurance of $2 billion US, or is there more to it?
Thank you very much for having me on your show. As always, it's a pleasure. As far as the IMF goes, it is the largest determinant at present in the volatility of the rupee. Unfortunately, the currency is vulnerable to various factors, including internal dynamics, but also it is vulnerable to the energy prices, the amount of reserves we have with us, foreign currency reserves. So you should expect further volatility until this deal is signed, and in that sense, or the next tranche is released of an existing deal, I should say. And until that is signed, you should expect continued volatility in the rupee.
All right. Now, the IMF is expected to, release the tranche by next week. There are certain last-minute guarantees that, of course, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has given. The UAE will, inshallah, be giving as well. What are your expectations once this tranche is released to Pakistan? Should Pakistan continue the relationship with the IMF? Do you feel it's pertinent that Pakistan continue and stabilize its relationship with the IMF?
Excellent question. Yes, Pakistan should continue its reliance or relationship with the IMF, but not a dependency or a reliance on IMF tranches. And what I mean by that is we have to start to look towards generation of foreign currency, productive capacity, utilization, lower inflation, and all these things through our internal efforts. And in that regard, one shouldn't rely on the IMF. It's a very difficult, system in terms of the requirements, in terms of the stipulations. It is a tough gig. But as far as we are stuck right now, we should not just have a relationship with them, but follow through with our commitments to the IMF, because we have a history of going to the IMF that dates quite far back, and this would be our 23rd or 24th program. Now the question is, how do we resolve the dependency for a longer term? And that requires changes in the structure of the economy, and that isn't easy to do, but it is necessary to do. And so I expect us to follow through with the commitments that we have made to the IMF.
All right. Usman, I'd also like to understand. Our Minister for Finance, Ishaq Dar Saab, met with David Bloom, the US ambassador to Pakistan. A lot of discussion concerning our relationship were discussed, as well as strengthening our cooperation in the realm of finance and economy. Pakistan has also assured the US of its commitment to the IMF deal. How important is the role of the US as far as the IMF deal is concerned?
The US has a disproportionate role in the decision making in the IMF, and you can sort of draw a correlation between the periods in which Pakistan US relations have been very warm. It has been easier for us to access or tap into IMF funds. And when relations have been somewhat strained, it has been tougher. So that implies that it does matter directly. But indirectly, the IMF's voting base, the shareholder base, still has a disproportionate US role in it, although other countries are seizing more voting rights and voting dominance. But still, we should take very seriously the importance of the US in an architecture that it in fact built. After 1945, Bretton Woods institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank came into existence under the auspices of an American-led financial architecture. Of course, the US has diminished in importance because it was 50% of the world's GDP in 1946, let's say, and now it is closer to 22%. So when we worry about just the IMF and World Bank seen through the prism of US relations, we should also keep in mind that there are other emerging powers, financial powers. There are other emergent financial institutions. And so we shouldn't have a lockstep, singular focus on the IMF for the longer run, because the financial markets have diversified and access to capital can be sourced from many different places, including indigenous strength, which is what I really
When
aim
you
for
talk of
Pakistan.
access to markets with indigenous sources, what are you pointing towards?
For example, in the current economic situation, a lot of our export-oriented industries have slowed down or shut down because the things are quite difficult right now. Once these get started, restarted, reactivated, redeployed, you will start to export. Then that will get you foreign currency reserves. Similarly, your diaspora is very large, and it seems to be holding back on remittances if we look at the pattern month on month. And there's a lot of capital belonging to Pakistanis but overseas that can be deployed back in Pakistan. That capital continues to grow, and we should recognize that our diaspora abroad is our single greatest resource as a people, and we should tap into that. And in addition, there are new agencies such as the Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, the AIIB, and other multilateral institutions which have a lot of capital parked, but they're looking for high return and comparably reasonable risk, not too high a risk projects. And so there are opportunities in Pakistan to find them. But in addition, if we also have, you must recognize that Pakistan has a very low savings rate. For a developing country, it's about 10 to 15%, but if you look at China, it's 40%, India, it's 25%. So our internal savings rate is very, very low, and it should be deployed towards investment locally, productive investment, not just go into unproductive sectors such as real estate, and that would make a very big difference for us indigenously.
All right, Usman, I'd also like to understand Ishaq Dar Saab, who was supposed to go to the United States to attend meetings with the IMF and the World Bank, has now pulled out of those meetings, citing political uncertainty and developing crisis in the country. He's also the leader of the House in the Senate, so I understand that. But the fact remains, will it affect if somebody else, another official, replaces Mr. Ishaq Dar in these important meetings? Will this affect our relationship with the IMF or the World Bank or this tranche that is supposed to be given to Pakistan in the next days?
Yes, it would, and this is a very important question. We have to also start to look at things from the IMF's perspective, and the IMF would like consistency, policy consistency, leadership consistency, so that it's easier for them to plan out a macroeconomic framework and then disperse funds that are applied towards realizing the macroeconomic framework. Not just this government, but in the previous government, there were switches of finance minister, and so one day the IMF is talking to one person, the next day it's talking to another person, and each person has different instructions or a different view on things, and so they come to the negotiating table disorienting existing dialogue. And I think this is very bad, because for Pakistan to indicate that it is serious, it has to have the same person, a responsible person who represents the will of the people, appointing ministers who speak on behalf of the government with a view to having long-term implementation of economic policies. That would be the ideal. And so, yes, it does send a bad signal if your finance ministers change abruptly, and that too not perhaps on the economic merits of the policies.
But he hasn't been changed exactly. It's just that he's been replaced
No.
by somebody for these particular meetings at the last moment because of the current situation in the country. That doesn't mean that we have a new finance minister. It's just that the person who will be attending these meetings from Pakistan's side will no longer be Mr. Ishaq Dar. Also, I'd like to understand the confirmation from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for of $2 billion US, the probable confirmation that we might have from the UAE in the coming days as well. How important will that be to stabilize Pakistan's economy? Should Pakistan look at other avenues? And if so, which should those avenues be? Should they be internal? Should they be external? Should we depend more on our remittances? What should Pakistan do?
This is an excellent way to try to frame what the role is of other countries, the bilateral stuff. So the IMF has behaved in a strange way. We have to realize this. It's behaved in a strange way because in order to release the next tranche of the extended fund facility, it has asked that we have guarantees from other sovereign nations that they will park X amount of money in with our state bank, which would then help to bolster the minimum amount of reserves. And on top of that, then the tranche comes to us. This is quite a strange policy. This is not something the IMF does, and it makes you raise eyebrows on why it would be contingent on that. But since we required these sovereign guarantees, this assistance from friendly countries, this had to be a part of it. So we have done that, and Saudi Arabia has been the most forthcoming. There are other countries who can and should be forthcoming, including the UAE and Qatar and so on. And that is because we have a long-standing important economic relationship. Communities live there. These are the two largest sources of our remittances. We've literally built these countries with our labor. It's not a joke. I mean, they may push us around at the airport, but the truth is that these countries have been built on our sweat. So they have to look at it in a long-term context. And then, of course, they are saying that we are happy to do that, but we want to see actual reform this time. If it's your 23rd or 24th time, we don't want to see you going to the IMF a 25th time.
You talk
And
of
I agree
reforms,
with that.
Usman. That's a very interesting point that you make. You know, when we talk of reforms, the Asian Development Bank very recently has decelerated Pakistan's growth to 0.6% in the fiscal year 2023. It says if we want to increase our growth to 2% in the fiscal year 2024, we need to have necessary macroeconomic and structural reforms. Which reforms should they be?
Above all, it pertains to the sources of drain on our fiscal deficit. This means we have, for example, a circular debt problem in the energy sector, and this is one where you really have to fix it in order to make sure the energy is used for productive reasons and doesn't dissipate, is addressed properly. This is a very big one. The second is the nature of our expenditures. Since we are so mired down in debt dependency, they are arguing that you have to get this debt out of the way, not just the interest but the principal. And then it's on the expenditure side that your government is actually too large, your bureaucracy is too big for the things that it does. Does it really deliver public value, particularly at the provincial level? I myself am not convinced that it does at the provincial level especially. So there has to be work done on the expenditure side at the same time that we broaden the tax base for the revenue collection. These are the sorts of things that it expects the ADB encourages us to do in order for the GDP rate to increase over time, not immediately, but over the set of years.
All right. Finally, the World Bank also releases a report on Pakistan Development Update, talks about nearly 4 million Pakistanis being pushed into poverty this fiscal year. How can Pakistan come out of this current state? What should be Pakistan's long-term poverty eradication framework?
Oh, well, the amount that we have invested in our people is comparatively low, and therefore the returns that we reap from the investment in them is low. Therefore, we have to look at the investment in the people, which starts in terms of healthcare and education, which have not always been priorities at the district level, provincial level. And even though the federal tries its best, the federation has become hollow because of the system by which it disperses funds to the provinces. So if you invest in the people, you will reap a higher return, and that should incentivize the people who have been invested in to generate productive activities. That is probably the best way. I say that because that is the case that has been seen across Asia, which is now a relatively prosperous continent. And so we have to just catch up to the rest of Asia now. That should be our target. using
All
this.
right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Usman Chohan, political economist, to have joined us, to have talked to us about Pakistan's economic outlook, about its relationship with the IMF, and what we look forward to in the coming weeks and months as far as Pakistan and its economy is concerned. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. Finally, before I go, this is the end of the week, so of course we'll be seeing you again on Monday. But a small prayer goes out for our Palestinian brothers who are still under the hegemonic attitude of the Israelis, and at the same time we also wish all our viewers a very happy World Health Day today, which is being observed to make people aware about their right to access to mental health. It is important for stability in any society to understand if you are under some kind of a mental disorder, you need to have that treated, and for that the launch of government's first dedicated mental health application, Hamraz and helpline, will be extremely important for the citizens' well-being. Have a great weekend. See you inshallah on Monday.